What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to review Somerville. Now, the title is maybe a bit aggressive, but you know what? It really is how I feel about this game, and I want to go over it. I want to talk about the pros and cons, because this is not a terrible game. This is not a game that does every single thing wrong. In fact, it's a game that's got a lot going for it, and I feel, and I tweeted this kind of last night, fighting itself. It's a game that fights itself pretty much at every single turn. And I don't know if I've ever seen a game that kind of wants to be something and knows what it wants. And it's got the DNA, and then it sometimes hits it, but then sometimes it doesn't, and it just does some really, really bad stuff. Because there are some really awful kind of moments in this game, or mechanics, or whatever, that really do hurt this game. So, I always like to say this, and I want to bring this up because I'm going to compare it to Inside and Limbo. It's natural, it makes sense, and here's why. Because the founders of that studio that made Limbo and Inside, the founders of that studio moved over, or at least some of them, moved over and formed a new studio called Jump Ship. This is their first game, Somerville. So it's being built, let's say, with the DNA of Inside and Limbo. So I'm going to compare it to that because, going in, I had said this before, I was like the only one that was talking about this game on YouTube. You can look and find a video that wasn't from me. You won't find many of them that talked about this game that wasn't from a Podcast Now or Podcast Now Plus account. And I was excited for it because visually and just the stylistic choices, it looked awesome. And I will say, I'm pleased to report the stylistic, choices of Somerville are awesome. It is, I don't know if it's the game's biggest strength. I think it's one of the game's biggest strengths because just visually how this game looks, it does look incredible. Especially some of the more when the game kind of opens up and it shows you, I don't know if vistas is the right word. My English vocabulary is kind of limited. But when it shows you like far-reaching, distance and you see things in the distance, it looks awesome. It looks really, really cool. And I like the, it's not, it is maybe a little blocky, like how the character models actually look. I like it. I really do like the visual tone, and I think it works. Now, it works to do what? Well, that's the thing. So when I am recording this, right, I want to eventually do it, but I didn't want to do it for the review. I want to look up, like, other people trying to explain the story, because there was a lot of stuff that was going on in the story, and in classic Limbo and Inside fashion, there is a story, and for this game, I feel like it definitely is more up for your interpretation. Now, maybe there's other ways of looking at it. There's also different endings. I am 99% sure I got the bad ending, and I kind of did it on purpose because I was kind of done with the game. So there's more to kind of explore, and I will say it's specifically Inside. Limbo, I think, is just one of, like, a near perfect kind of game. Inside, I don't think is as good as Limbo, but I also think when you look at, like, what they're trying to say with Inside, like when you look at ending explained or story explained for Inside, it helps the game. Maybe it will help Somerville, I don't know, but I don't know, I wanted to do the review based, I played it, what did I think of it, and I wasn't impressed. Continuing with some of the positives, though, besides just the visuals, the music at its peak is very good, but this game so often is so quiet and does absolutely nothing, does literally nothing with any music or even sound effects, and like, doing nothing with music is also a choice, and maybe it's the choice that they thought would work. It didn't enhance anything. Maybe it didn't hurt anything, but it didn't enhance anything. Also, the more, I don't even know, like, over-the-top moments, if we can call it that, really when you're being chased or when, like, the beams are flashing and you're trying to like, hide, when there is, like, a sense of, I guess, dread, when it's like, oh, my dear God, like, you're kind of the helpless person to this alien invasion, if it actually even is that, right? That is very, very exciting. And I will also say the beginning is awesome. The first, like, you have to get used to it, and you have to figure out how puzzles work in this game and stuff like that, which the puzzles are atrocious, but we'll talk about that in a second. In the beginning, they're fine, and as the game opens up, the first 20 minutes of the game, I thought was incredible, because it does have this very grand feel to it. There's a lot of sounds. It's very, like, it reminds me, my wife literally actually said it. She didn't know the movie name, but she knew, like, I knew what she was talking about. War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise. It felt a lot like that, except for, like, even your main character, because your main character has some sort of powers, right? So it kind of feels a little bit like, but especially like the big thundering kind of sound that when it goes like, and it shakes everything, and again, you just feel a sense of like, oh god, here they are. That it did make me think of War of the Worlds. So it's funny that, and I thought that she said it out loud, which is pretty funny. But so it has that, and I think those are all very big strengths to the game. It gets weird and wild at the end. I'm not a huge fan of the actual, like, I'd say last 25 minutes of the game. It actually, so here's how it's broken down. It's got the first, like, well, first 20 minutes is like the opening, then you got like everything else. But I would say for a good solid hour, I really did not like this game whatsoever. Then it gets rather good for a brief period, and I mean it. And I mean, I could literally break it down in my head. First 20 minutes, awesome. Next hour, some of the most frustrating things I've ever seen in my life. Then you got maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes again of it being really, really good. And then you got this ending, which is, I mean, is it over the top? I suppose, but it's also so out there and weird, and I didn't really jive with it that I wouldn't call it good. So it didn't even stick the landing, I guess is what I'm also trying to say. And that was the game. That was the entire game. Maybe that hour segment was actually longer than an hour. So let's talk about what you mainly do in this game, and that's solve puzzles. And now I've said this before, and maybe I confuse people with the God of War Ragnarok review. So let me make it very clear. Like, I am not a puzzle kind of guy. I get frustrated very easily at puzzles. I'm not very smart. I feel like I have a natural skill at playing games. I feel like if I play games long enough, I get rather good. I mean, God of War Ragnarok is an example in terms of the combat and beating bosses. Like, I can get good if I play the game long enough. Rocket League, I'm diverse. I can do many things. But I do get very frustrated when it comes to puzzles. I guess I'm not smart in that way. I can't see things the way they want me to see it. And so, with that being said, that's me. And I don't try to hold that against the game because I'm an idiot. Why would I hold that against the game? Okay? Want to make that clear. But the same thing for God of War is the same thing here, where my criticism, I think, is kind of removed a little bit from that, and I'll tell you why. So the puzzles in this game are so frustrating and so badly executed that I went to a walkthrough on YouTube, and the walkthrough on YouTube that I watched, they were stuck arguably longer than me in most of the puzzles I had to look up. I didn't look up all the puzzles. In fact, some of them I flew by where I would keep pointing to my phone. I would occasionally watch to try to catch up, see where I was compared to another person. And some of my puzzles I just flew by while they took forever. And then also some of the puzzles that we were both kind of stuck on, I still actually figured it out before. And then some puzzles I just had absolutely no idea. And that's why I went to that, the YouTube video in the first place. But in that, not only did I see somebody else struggle massively, but the comments, every single comment to this guy's video were people saying, the game's so frustrating, it doesn't show it the right way. So I feel strong enough to say, based off what I've seen online, to kind of back me up, but also just my own opinion on it. I think the puzzles are horribly executed. Most of them. There's some cool ones, and I guess even ones that are very difficult and stupid are also kind of cool, but they are just so mind-blowingly dumb in the sense that you have to see things that I just don't think actually make any sense. Also, you sometimes have to like fool the game. The controls are not good. This game really struggles with controls overall. Your character can get glitched quite easily. Mine got glitched so bad that it made like the sound as if your character was falling and dying, and it made one of those like thundering kind of sounds. It made that when I fell off of like this much of like a hill. And it was very odd, and it was like the game is a little bit buggy. There's actually some pop-ins within a few feet of me at some times. It's not a well-polished game. So I think a couple more months would have helped that aspect, but I don't think it would have helped the puzzles, because that's a design choice how these puzzles operate. So to me, it was mainly that, and then I don't know, it never kept like any of the highs. So the first 20 minutes was so good. There was another 20 minutes, later on that was so good, but it never kept it. It just completely, and with these puzzles, the thing also I saw other people talking about was they don't feel rewarding. Like, and again, that's a personal thing, but I will say my personal feeling of this game, when you complete the puzzles, I think normally you probably want people to feel like, oh, I accomplished it, and I also can't wait for the next one. This game does them so much in a row, so many frustrating ones in a row, with little things, not enough, they are just little things breaking it up. but they're not enough, so you feel like you're just kind of like, trucking along, and it really makes you want to not do it anymore. And that's the opposite of what you want. I don't feel rewarded. I don't feel like I did something really special and that I had like a eureka moment to figure out a puzzle. I feel like, oh, that was really dumb. How was I supposed to actually see that? Or how was the game supposed to actually function that way? And then, oh, I have to do it again in another 5 minutes. I actually don't want to do it again in 5 minutes. And when you have that over and over again, it just brings it down. So in my opinion, it's got horrible moments to the game, but the game is not, it's not a horrible video game in general. But also, like I said, super short. It took me, and again, okay, I had a guide. I watched it for maybe like 6 or 7 different puzzles. Still, that saved me God knows how much time. But it took me about 2.5 hours, which is very short. Now, I mean, Inside and Limbo, they're also very short, and that's fine. But it's just something to kind of throw out there where, it's on Game Pass, so you don't have to pay for it if you have Game Pass, of course, right? And I like, is this a different kind of game that, one night you could play it for one night, beat it, and move on with your life afterwards, and maybe it sticks with you long term, maybe it doesn't. Yeah, and that's fine. So, ultimate, and it's tough actually to, like, if you were reviewing Limbo or Inside and you also had like the Game Pass argument, how does that change the review? I mean, it does honestly factor into it where there's not a lot you're losing with it, so maybe that's bonus, but it's tough because I don't want like a game that's like this game, in my opinion, is pretty mediocre. This is not, and even the spectacle of it, even like the subtle messaging or the kind of underlining story that they're trying to tell, it's not even close to Limbo or Inside. It's not. I mean, those games are much better. This is the natural evolution of where I think those games would go. I will say that because Inside definitely felt like an evolution of Limbo, and this game definitely feels like an evolution of Inside, where you're just moving around more. The puzzles are a little bit more like 3D, right, where you can kind of move up, down, or like towards however you want to call it, right, left, right, but also forward and backward, which Inside started to mess with, and Limbo didn't do it right at all. So it is how I'd imagine a game from them, and again, not the whole team, but some of them. It's how I would imagine a game from them being in 2022. I would absolutely say that. Ultimately, the thing with these kind of games, though, right, is the puzzle solving needs to feel rewarding. It needs to, I think, be broken up enough times where you don't feel like you're just, trucking along and it's not enjoyable to do it. Again, there are some really, really cool puzzles. There's some really, really nice ones, but it's not consistent. This game is definitely not consistent at all, considering my main thing with it is 20 minutes of really good, then however long of not, then 20 minutes of good, and then they don't nail the ending. In my opinion, it's uneven. It's just uneven. If it kept the level of those 2 20-minute segments, this would be a really good game because I love those 2 moments, and they're long. They're not just like a single second in time. So that's my thought on it. Now, again, free if you have Game Pass. One night, doesn't take a lot of your time. So you lose a little bit of your time if you don't like it, and you lose no money if you don't like it. So it's not that bad. But ultimately, like final thing to say, this is not a game that sticks with me. This is not a game that 3, 4, 5 years down the line, like I still, when I think of these kind of games, I think of Limbo and Inside. Like I'll always remember them. I'll always remember how incredible it was to play those games the first time. I will never think that ever for Somerville, because it's not the same thing. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on so you guys know when these videos go up, and I hope to see you all on the next one.